Hello. Okay, so I just did a entire video, okay? Got all the way to the end, and we're having a thunderstorm here, so I don't know if that was it, but I did the whole video, and then the very end of it got chopped off. So I'm starting over again. And this video is going to be, is IFB considered a cult? I consider it a cult. Even though I think they have the right Jesus, and they do have the correct way to salvation through grace through faith, I still think it's a cult. But you do the decision yourself based on the hallmarks of a cult. So I have the hallmarks of a cult that I got from ChatGPT, and then we'll compare them to the IFB. I'm munching on popcorn. I hope my munching doesn't offend anyone, but okay, I'll try to be clear. All right, so the first one is authoritarian leadership. So this says, one person or small group holds absolute power and is not to be questioned. Okay. So in IFB churches, the pastor pretty much has absolute power. Now they say that Christ is the head of the church. They say that, but whatever the pastor says goes. Okay, so he's the shepherd of the flock, is the pastor. So, you know, if he reads in his own personal preferences in there, then, you know, that's what you got to follow. I'll just give a quick example of that. I remember, for whatever reason, this particular pastor had an aversion to people who sunbathed or went to the beach. Okay, we live in Florida, so pretty much everybody goes to the beach. It's like what you do here. And so he would always make digs about sun worship. So if you had a tan and you went to that church, you were going to be directly pointed out, but he was going to make some sort of, snide remark about being a sun worshiper. Okay? So stuff like that. And so he would read his own personal preferences into the sermons of what he thought was good or bad or whatever, moral, I'll say. Also, as a female, you were not allowed to go to the pastor yourself. Okay? Everything you had to do is go through your husband if you had one. Okay? So, in my specific case, I knew more than my husband did. I was a Christian before he was. He did finally get saved too, but he wasn't a seeker like I was, as much as I was. So I knew more than my husband did about the Bible. So what am I going to go to my husband? I mean, what do I do then? Well, now I know that you can go to God directly. Okay? So that's what I did. I went to God directly, and that's a whole nother video, to be honest with you. But anyway, so on number 1, hallmarks of a cult, authoritarian leadership, absolutely. IFB, you can put a check on number 1 in my book. Okay? So number 2 is thought control. I'm going to wiggle my mouse because my video might cut me off again. Okay. So number 2 is thought control. Critical thinking is discouraged or forbidden. Members are taught to ignore logic, reason, and outside information. Absolutely. Yes. I mean, it's the world versus God, right? Although, they didn't teach not to listen to, scientific realities or anything like that. But of course, I don't believe in evolution, not because they told me not to, just because that was something that God revealed to me when I had my experience with God, is that he created, I believe in a real creation. But anyway, but if you didn't believe that, if you did have another belief, it would be discouraged, absolutely. Or, maybe you're not saved if you believe in evolution, so that kind of thing. So number 2, thought control, definitely. In my book, there's a check next to thought control as well. So number 3 is an us versus them mentality. Absolutely, it is everything outside of the group is of the world. So it's the world, and then it's us. Okay? I'm trying to think of it in, we have the truth. We even have the truth when it comes to other Christians. So it didn't matter if you were a Christian or not. The IFB movement was the absolute truth. Some other Christians had kind of the truth, but they were off because their interpretation of the Bible was off. Okay, so if they didn't use the the King James only. So if you didn't use a King James Bible, then of course you're off because the King James Bible is the only true Bible. Okay, so that's how they thought. Because God can't use another Bible to them. And I don't want to make fun of anybody, but that was another thing. Our pastor, it's just the fakery. Everything's so fake and fake pious. It leads to self-righteousness, It leads to this, we're the ones with the truth. And, they looking down your nose at other people because you have the truth, right? And it's just phoniness, It's thick. The phoniness is thick. It used to drive me crazy. So our pastor used to pray in King James language. So he'd put the these and the thous in his prayers because he said that's how God spoke to him. So he would do the whole King James language even when he spoke himself. So anyway, that was rather annoying and phony in my book, but anyway. Okay, so check for number 3 in us versus them mentality. I would say yeah. Okay, so number 4, isolation. You're pulled away from the family, friends, or outside perspectives. There's pressure to only associate with other members. Definitely. If you hang out with other people that aren't Christians, then you're going to get the side eye. The hairy eyeball for sure on that one. If they find out. And you might even get turned in. You might get a good talking to. Or what they like to do in IFB is make a fake scenario, right? And just work it into the sermon where it's about you. They make it obvious enough to know it's about you, but they don't actually mention any names, okay? I actually have another example of that where there was an associate pastor that used to preach. So the pastor used to let him, have a sermon every once in a while. And this guy was a super control freak, and he had his little harem that he used to hang out with all the girls, the women, at the thing, and try to be their father, okay? As if we don't have a father already. His name is God and Jesus, okay? But anyway, so he was super controlling, and my sister at the time wasn't married, so they used to try to take him and his wife used to kind of take her in, and he used to call himself her father, and stuff like that, and try to be, like a family to her, I guess you'd say. But it was nothing more than control. So you see, they used to drive her nuts a lot. But anyway, I guess she didn't do something that they wanted her to do, and so he worked it into the sermon one day, and it was really, really specific about the events that happened, and called her out in the church. And I think he might have even used her name. And it was really ugly. She was really mad. But anyway, so they do stuff like that. So yes, isolationism, definitely. Also, shunning. They say they don't shun, but they do shun. And I got shunned when I left. That was another thing. I got a couple nasty emails saying that the way I left was the wrong way, when I just sent an email to the pastor and told him I was going in another direction. I don't owe anybody, but they think that you owe them something. You owe them an explanation. You've got to explain yourself all the time. So anyway, there's that. Loaded language is number 5. Special terms or phrases that are used to have meanings, but only within the group. Creating an insider identity and limits outside understanding. Example, worldly, fallen, in rebellion, backslidden. Okay, yes. If you weren't towing the line, then you were backslidden. If you wore pants, you've got some jeans on the weekends, you're backsliding. Okay. So yes, we definitely had our own language. It was, things were worldly. If you went to the movies, you were worldly. If you wore jeans, you were backslidden, or in rebellion. Yeah. So check on that one. Fear or shame-based control. Oh yeah, the guilting. Was horrible. The preaching really stepping. They used to call it stepping on your toes. Okay, there's some Christians that just love that. They love to be beaten. Okay, sheep beating. We used to call it sheep beating. Once we left. Okay, if you're in IFB, you're gonna be sheep beaten. Okay. And so heavy preaching. Fear and shame. I know that if one of the things that the pastor at the church I was at used to say is that if you took communion and you had any unconfessed sin or you took it unworthily, so if you were unsaved and you took communion, you better look out, because you're probably going to get struck by lightning or something worse. Okay, so or if you take it unworthily and you have some unconfessed sin in there, God just may take you out. Okay, and I think there was some twisting of scripture that they used to use for that, and something in the Bible about I can't remember who it was, but it was in the New Testament where somebody was withholding some money from God that they needed to build something, and they hid the money from somebody else. And then they ended up dying or something. So God just made, all right, if you take communion unworthily. So they used to keep you afraid of that. And I was afraid. I actually bought into the fear. And of course, I think it's a little bit about my anxiety and OCD, which of course all fed into that. So for me, I always left church feeling worse than when I walked in. Okay, which basically is what finally led me out, is that constant guilting and fearing. And so it really just made God into a tyrant and moves you further away from God's love. Okay, so number 7, put a big old check on the fear and shame-based control. Okay, so you can make your own decision on that. So 7 is exploitation. Members are often exploited financially, emotionally, sexually, or through labor. Okay, so yeah, we were told that if you didn't pay your 10% tithe, then yeah, God was mad at you if you didn't do that. Something bad might happen to you. Of course, God was pissed if you don't pay your 10%. I can't remember. If I thought about it hard enough, I could probably come up with like some serious examples of it. Specific examples of when they did that or exactly what they said. But basically, yeah, God is going to be mad, and you were expected to pay your 10% tithe or more, if, And they would always use some pulled out of context Old Testament scripture for that, even though we're not in the Old Testament anymore. And they would say that, we're in the New Testament, but, God, obviously if it's in the Bible, then it's what God likes. That's how they get around the whole Old Testament versus New Testament. Okay. And of course, labor. I told you I started cleaning the church, which I really didn't mind, but I really thought I was scrubbing toilets for Jesus. I thought, I'd be in the toilet there. You know what, Jesus, if you want me to scrub toilets, and hey, I'll scrub toilets for you, Jesus, like as if God expected that, or it made any difference to how God felt about me, That's that whole unconditional conditional love that they preach. Okay? So, big old check on number 7. Number 8, no exit without punishment. I'll get back to that too. So I told you I left. And yeah, I got some nasty grams from church, other church members that, we left in the wrong way. How dare we do that to pastor? Just leaving in general. You can't just leave a church. Yeah, they thought that. So we did get a whole ration of crap for leaving. And shunning. Yes, we got shunned. There were some people that still stayed in contact with us. My sister's son, my nephew, I remember, when they left, he still stayed in, he was young. He was like probably 10. And another church member wanted to have him come into church and sing. And the pastor said no. He wouldn't let him sing in church until he had a conference with my sister, because she left at the same time. A conference with her about why she left. So, control. There's the control again. Somebody's business why we left. Like as if we're not allowed to leave without asking permission from the pastor. Okay? Which goes back into the whole, head of the church. What do you call it? Authoritarian leadership, right? So there's your authoritarianism. Can't leave without permission. Or if you do, there's something wrong with you and you need a good talking to. All right? And so also I was friends with somebody that left that actually stayed friends with me, and I was at her house one time and another church member came over and she wouldn't even look at me. She wouldn't look at me in the eyes. She didn't. I said hi to her. She didn't say hi. So she completely shunned me. It was somebody I was friends with, had no problem with before, but because we left the church, we were shunned. We were being shunned. And then it's been 10 years. And then I saw another member of the church that actually, she left too. Her and her husband were deep into the whole IFB thing, but they went to another IFB church because they didn't like some of the stuff that was going on. They were Sunday school teachers, and they actually left, I think, before I did. But anyway, I ended up seeing them, or her, the wife, at the grocery store when I moved to another area. This was pretty recently, maybe like a year ago, maybe 2. Anyway, I saw her at the grocery store and was like, hi, I said hi to her. And first of all, I saw her look at me and she looked away. She, I saw her look and then pretend like she didn't see me. She pretended like she didn't see me. But me being the friendly person I am, I wasn't going to let her get away with that. So I walked right up to her and she did give me a hug. And she handed me a tract for her Bible, like a little. So it was, for her, it was, here, you need to go to our church. It wasn't, hi, how you doing? Like we were friends or we ever knew each other. And it was very, very fakey, But anyway, I ended up seeing her again at the gym that I go to. She showed up. And she did the same thing. She tried to pretend like she didn't see me. But I walked up to her and said, hi, and I probably saw her there maybe 10 times. But then it was like Shunsville. She wanted to shun me, but I kind of, it's in her face, so she said hi. But if it wasn't for that, she wouldn't have talked to me, because they probably think that I'm, the Jehovah Witnesses use the term apostate. So I'm trying to think of the equivalent word besides backslidden. I think that we, instead of apostate, we would use the term backslidden, because they don't, think that you're not in the kingdom anymore or anything, but they just think that you're going a different route and you're a backslider, and so they shouldn't hang around you. Okay? So I would say that is a check on number 8. I would say all of the hallmarks of a cult, the IFB movement checks. What do you think? So let me know what you think, and thanks for listening. So I'll talk to you later. Okay? Bye.